Unless you work a great deal with people, you may be amazed how many folks cannot conceive that they are here for any reason. They come to me constantly, asking for help or suggestions as to how to make life meaningful in some way. They do not feel or believe that they're going anywhere or accomplishing anything, or for that matter, that there is very much to be accomplished in this process of living. It is obvious, I think, to all of us that the pressures under which we live today make perspective difficult, and it is very easy to fall into a kind of fatigue and take the attitude that the only solution is to sort of slide along through life with as few complications as possible. Yet if we believe, basically, even in the doctrine of evolution, it is evident that we are here for at least one reason, and that is to grow. Therefore, we do have a general collective purpose, and that purpose is to contribute to the common evolution of life. The individual certainly has the opportunity during the course of years to gain certain understanding and insight. One of his most common difficulties is his rejection of the challenge of thoughtfulness. Unless he thinks a little as he goes along, life cannot have very much meaning for him. He grows because of dedications on an emotional level and reflections on an intellectual level. And unless he trains himself, at least to a degree, to make use of his own internal, mental, and emotional resources, life must remain rather dull. If, however, he is willing to give some consideration to improvement, he will find life much more interesting. Here again we have this problem that we're all afraid of. Some time ago I was talking in New York to a publisher. We were discussing the possibility of a book title, and I recommended something like Practical Philosophy or something of that nature, and this man raised his hands in holy horror. He said, "Never use that word philosophy. In the publishing business, it is a nasty word. We don't mention it." And I said, "Well, can we use a synonym? How about educational?" "Oh," he said, "that is even nastier." He said, "Any word which implies the reader of the book is supposed to think will cut the circulation 90%. It's hard to believe that such is the case. But in the great body of people, that world of persons that thoughtful individuals know very little about, this is probably largely true, although not as true as it was a few years ago. We have discovered, for example, in publishing, that these new inexpensive paper-bound reprints of fine books are selling. There are people who dare to study the philosophy of Voltaire or the Republic of Plato. We've learned one way to make them do it, and that is to bring the book to them so cheaply that they buy it as a bargain and have to live with the contents. It's almost impossible to resist a classic for 35 cents. And our peculiar sense today of economy sort of steps in, and we become book conscious. There is a market for better books, but it is not as large a market as it should be. And one of the reasons for this is that the person is afraid of the very concept of growth, of thoughtfulness, of reflection. We are all afraid to use muscles that have seldom been used, because the moment we do, we develop mysterious aches and pains. And the person who, in the enthusiasm of a new craft shop or a new set of golf clubs, goes to work too enthusiastically, will be uncomfortable for a while. It is pretty evident that when we ask the average person suddenly to use his mind, he is going to develop intellectual stress and strain. He is going to ache mysteriously. Probably in this case, the aching will be a sense of inferiority that comes over him. He suddenly realizes that he cannot cope with 3-syllable words, that he has difficulty in following 10 or 15 pages of logical, sequential development of idea. He's not used to any of these processes. And when he is expected to contemplate upon some great philosophic principle, he is bewildered. The answer seems to go back to his education. The faculties which he needs to control and direct his own life as a person have never been adequately developed. He slides through education, becoming totally bored with it. And after he has spent 15 years in school, from that time on, education is a nasty word. He doesn't want to hear any more about it. He's done enough of it. And as his education has not given him the instruments with which to approach self-analysis, and has not bestowed any incentive for the development of his internal faculties and powers, he drifts along through various activities which occupy the concrete faculties of the mind, keeping him busy and keeping his mind off of essentials. It is only when some emergency arises that he is forced to use faculties. And consequently, an emergency appears to him to be a very serious crisis, when perhaps there would be no emergency at all if he used his faculties more continuously and grew accustomed to thinking. In this way, we recognize that when the material activities of life begin to lose interest, or we become exhausted or older, no longer dominated by immediate ambitions, we have a tendency to become lonely, isolated, discouraged, and prematurely aged because of lack of internal life. We also can go back and we can watch certain professions which give us a little clue to our problem. We will observe that whereas most trades and crafts and many business activities are age-bound, that is, that the individual reaching a certain age can no longer adequately maintain the rhythm or pace of his work. The so-called higher learned professions have seldom this age limitation. A great artist, unless he is stricken with paralysis or something of that nature, can paint till the day he dies. The great composer can write music to the closing years of his life. The great doctor although he may no longer wish to keep an active practice, can continue in a consulting capacity throughout his entire life. And there are cases of physicians in this country who are active in the fulfillment of their profession at the age of 80 or 90. Wherever the mind or the emotions mature or are developed into a specialized field, man begins to escape the retirement problem. He discovers that his intellect is just as active after 60 as it is before 40, perhaps more active and richer. And therefore he does not have to look forward to long periods of semi-retirement, because his physical strength is not equal to the pace of the time in which he lives. It is the same with our total intellectual life, entirely apart from our business considerations. The stronger the mental, emotional consciousness of the individual, the more he can control and direct every day of his living to the attainment in the end of a full and complete life without the terrible letdowns that we have where the person depends too completely upon external circumstances. Thus, in evolution and in the growth patterns of human beings, it seems that man moves in the first third of his life through periods of attainment of knowledge. He is busy with his schooling and with his social adjustment problems. Then, through the long plateau of middle life, he is a producer. He must maintain and support the responsibilities which he has assumed. He must make his career and prepare for his own future. Then in the later years of life, he enters into a reflective condition, which may extend from his 50th or 60th year through his expectancy, which today, in many instances, will pass 80 successfully. Therefore, he has a comparatively long afternoon and evening of life, much longer than his ancestors knew for the most part. It's true that we produced centenarians 1,000 years ago, but the general expectancy was not as great as it is today. And fully half of the population of Europe in the 17th century failed to reach its 50th year. Today, a very large percentage will be efficient, capable of personal growth, integration, for 20 or 30 years more than our forefathers were. This confronts us with a great problem of use of time and shows that by degrees the responsibility for activity moves from the physical to the mental. And in our older years, physical limitation is mental opportunity. We are gradually pressed by circumstances out of the haste of earlier living and into a leisure for which we are being more and more protected. This leisure is our problem. And most of the individuals who come without any pattern and looking forward to leisure as extraordinary boredom simply have never created any concept of life within themselves capable of directing their activity. Those who have created such basic patterns and have established them well find that the later years of life are not as dismal and difficult, even though perhaps economic situations may become limited. The person does not find that reduction of income, as long as there is actual security, prevents the gradual development and enrichment of the internal life, nor does it prevent the individual from being useful. It is where income is depleted and the inner life impoverished at the same time that we have a desperate situation. So looking through the pattern, it would seem that man is supposed to move from the childhood pattern of attainment of knowledge through useful labor to a kind of repose and rest. The East Indian philosophies have emphasized this clearly by dividing the life of the individual into these three major sections. Youth, which is a period of dependency upon support of family and providing by others. Maturity, self-provision. Attainment and the meeting of social responsibility and obligation. And more advanced age, which is man's peculiar time set aside for himself. The years in which he can do as he pleases, as he wishes to do within his own sphere of activity. It is because he does not wish to do anything that he is in trouble at this time. With this obvious pattern everywhere unfolding, we perceive that man has gained a distinction over the animal kingdom around him. Very few animals ever die of old age. Very few animals survive the decline of their physical powers. They become preys to other forms of life. Or as the first sickness appears, it is mortal, for lack of available remedy. Therefore, man has been given this other length of years, by which he is more divided from the animal, perhaps, than by his biological differences. He is divided from other lives inasmuch as he has a great cycle of reflection available to him. A tremendously enriching period of years. Years which can be faced with a great deal of security if we build for them. Actually, of course, the ideal situation is that thoughtfulness should begin in childhood, and that the person should early develop a plan, a purposed living, so that all the way along he can be mindful of those values which he will later want. Of course, that is not easy, particularly where there is no social example. If it became fashionable, all our young people would do it. But while it is not fashionable, it is difficult to cause the individual to see why he should be more thoughtful than his associates. Actually, if he could begin life by planning, rather than by purposeless pressures, he would reach those years of retirement, these philosophic years, in far better condition to enjoy them. Mistakes which he makes along the way, excesses which he indulges for escape mechanisms, and various unreasonable demands upon life may result in poor health in declining years. These pressures reduce our philosophic allotment, or at least make it less comfortable and enjoyable than it should be. Many of our health problems arise from our simple lack of orientation. Confusion can result in pathology. Confusion is one of the most enervating, debilitating emotions that we can possibly experience. So we have this one basic thought now, that evolution is offering us a patterned existence. And the purpose that evolution wishes us primarily to attain is that we shall leave this world wiser than when we arrived. Wiser in essential values. better able to understand and interpret life, richer in internal memories, recollections, a better counselor for the young, for it still remains true that age must lead youth in serious reflection. If, however, the necessary qualities have not been early developed, the prestige of age is lost. The rewards that come from the realization that we can serve others are taken from us if we have not prepared adequately for such activity and service. Now, apart from this pattern, then, of natural expectancy of progress, we have another interesting situation to consider. Each human being who comes into this world is a kind of individual equation. Each person differs from all others. Each individual has a certain allotment brought forward from previous activity, the merits and demerits with which he is endowed at birth. If we do not wish to assume this to be true, then we can assume that heredity bestows certain allotments, and that because of these allotments, no two human beings can be identical. They may even feel that they are much the same, but still there are differences, internal differences of appreciation, understanding, capacity, values which we cannot falsely or suddenly and artificially stimulate. From the beginning, then, each individual, because of what he is, because of the formula at the root of himself, must have a destiny which is a little different from the destiny of anyone else. When I say a little different, I mean in terms of our relative existence here. I do not mean ultimate destiny, rather immediate destiny. This immediate destiny is different from the destiny of others, not necessarily because our virtues differ, but because our inabilities differ. Therefore, there are levels of attainment which are available to us, and these levels are different. It would seem then perfectly natural and reasonable to assume that the values and patterns that we natively possess indicate the general course that we could or should follow. Every limitation within ourselves is a challenge. Every strong, powerful attribute which we possess is an opportunity. We are responsible for our weaknesses, and our strengths are our privileges of service and direct progress. This being inevitably true, there must be a peculiar kind of destiny, which is intrinsic in the archetype of birth. The person who is born is at the moment of birth in a position to attain a certain end. We all recognize, for example, that every child that comes into the world might become President of the United States. Most of them will not attain this end, and as they get older, many will not want to. But essentially, the potential presumably is there till we learn something to the contrary. As the child unfolds, we begin to perceive that its own individuality is going to affect its destiny. We find that it is inclined to certain lines of thought, that it has aptitudes and abilities which we encourage and educate and try to help the person to find his place in this life. His place is the result of himself. And to the basic characteristics must therefore be added the strength of decision or determination. The person with many potentials and very little continuity of purpose may not attain any of them. A person with fewer potentials but with greater continuity may attain considerably. Thus it is not only the capacities which we possess, but the resolution with which we work with capacities. And this is another weakness of our people. We are not inclined to work very strenuously with our capacities. And we divide them clearly into two groups. The one group that receives the greatest attention is that which opens or promises greatest economic progress. The individual will develop for the sake of his survival such abilities as seem to indicate economic security. He will therefore devote considerable time and effort to learning his profession or his business or his craft or trade in order that he may be a respected citizen capable of a sphere of financial influence suitable to his needs. But the development constantly of these economic potentials results in the unbalance of the total psychic pattern. Perhaps there is no point in psychology less emphasized and more important than this constant social process of developing in an unbalanced manner. The individual gradually focusing all of his resources upon one material objective may attain penetration in his chosen field, but he ignores too much of his own nature. As a result, he reaches this older period in which he could enjoy total integration with no capacity to attain it. From the beginning, therefore, it should be a balanced program of growth. Now, is such a balanced program possible in our way of life? Is it actually within the range of human endeavor that man today could be economically secure and at the same time develop his total personality? I think it is possible. But it will require greater effort. But this greater effort produces a greater reward. The reason why we do not realize this is that we keep our eyes too close to the economic pattern under which we live. Today particularly, the possibility of a balanced personal growth rests with our people, especially the American woman. It is more and more possible for her to divide and organize her resources so that she can develop more in the form of a well-balanced, integrated internal than ever before in history. The same thing is true to a less degree, but an increasing degree with men. The average person today is not under the pressure of labor that he knew long ago. He no longer is up at 6 working, and to work until sundown every day of the week, with the exception perhaps of Sunday. And a few hundred years ago, most of Sunday was devoted to the church. The individual started his religion on Sunday at dawn and was at it until he went to bed. So that he, again, had very little resource left for his own personal contemplation. Today, with shortening hours, with greater advantages, more vacation time, than ever before, the individual could and should begin to develop his own resources in a more balanced manner. And every day of the year we see new indication of a reduction of man-hours in the work of the individual. It is only a matter of time before the average person will not work more than 6 hours a day. And some groups have optimistically said the world's work can be done if everyone will do a good job 4 hours a day. Business today realizes that it is fortunate if it can get 4 hours of real work out of an 8-hour day. And as several employers have noted recently, it is becoming more difficult due to the fact that there is more and more of the coffee break. Until now, it seems that the coffee break is the profession, and work is an unpleasant interruption. Of course, that is a little exaggerated, but factually, we can have and do have more leisure than ever before in the history of the world. And because we have more leisure, we no longer value it. When the individual worked every day and maybe once a year found a little time for himself, it was precious time. But today we have many hours which we twiddle away doing nothing. Perhaps arguing, fretting, worrying, fussing, reading the paper and having our day spoiled, watching some program and becoming angry at the whole theory of television. We do these things, they are our way of life. But they remind us that the individual has today the time, if he wants to use it, to make major improvement in his total integration pattern. Now, major improvement does not necessarily mean that the individual should sit down and read all night. Nor does it mean that he should wander about in a very heavy condition of self-responsibility. Rather, that it is quite conceivable that modern man can make a social experience out of growth, because growth is, to a large degree, social integration. To become capable of an interesting avocational existence, the possibility of making leisure useful and interesting at the same time. Purposeful leisure. Leisure that helps us to build something, helps us to know people better, helps us to find opportunity for usefulness. Leisure which calls into active operation thoughtfulness, generosity, consideration, unselfishness, tolerance. These activities will help the person to integrate. If he could use his leisure to find out why his prejudices are not true, he would be way ahead. The only way he can do this is to take the time to really know the things about which he now has unreasonable opinions. His prejudices and his continuous living with them are not producing any pleasure for him. His leisure is not making him happy the way he wastes it now. Not only this, but it is very expensive. One of our great economic problems today is that every hour that a man is not earning, he is spending. And the longer his spending hours and the shorter his earning hours, the sooner the mortgage will be foreclosed. The individual can no longer find his leisure in a pleasant adventure in the forest watching buttercups like Thoreau did. Today his leisure means to pile the family into the car and start out to ruin a $20 bill. Otherwise, there is no idea of leisure. So leisure is becoming so expensive. One of the reasons, of course, is that this leisure is entirely objective. The individual is simply spending money to keep his mind off himself. Or, as he might say, get his mind off his responsibilities. But this type of leisure cuts very seriously into his economic resources, confronts him with perpetual temptation to overstep the reasonable boundaries of his budget. There are other kinds of leisure which do not require any such expenditures. Leisures which can result in improvement in family relations, improvement in social and environmental relations, and most of all, remember one thing, that leisure is an opportunity to understand people, and through understanding them, to know more about yourself. It is far more important for you to find out something about how other people think and how other people feel than it is to devote your spare time to the imaginary productions of the entertainment world, situations which may or may not have any valid relationship to facts. Through our entertainment, we are pressed constantly into the contemplation and acceptance of the abnormal, the unusual, the unique, the exceptional, and sometimes the impossible. As a result of that, we develop a psychology of life built around fantasy instead of built around a heart-to-heart talk with our own neighbor. We have lost realities. And as we build more and more into fantasy, our selfishness, our ambition, these increase. We want everything we see, but we do not feel any need for understanding. By allowing ourselves to drift in this way, we make life more difficult for everyone with whom we come in contact. Actually, it is pretty certain, however, that if a person tries to be thoughtful, he is going to become involved with others who are not thoughtful, and a few, perhaps rather serious crises will immediately develop. This is again a test of ingenuity and of true thoughtfulness. There is no reason why the individual's desire to improve should transform him into an uninteresting and unpleasant snob, looking down his nose at the trivia of other people. This is not the end at all. He must understand that trivia, just as he wishes to have his more serious thinking understood. But I have noticed among young people who get together in a corner and start arguing the largest problems of the universe first, because of their natural optimism, that in a very short time, a truly serious thought gets support, becomes interesting, and is carried on. Most people would really like to think, but they are afraid to expose the fact that they do not know how. They would like to be serious, but they do not wish it to interfere with their social relationships. They are afraid that they will be stigmatized as a highbrow and be left alone as though they were a contagious disease. Actually, underneath this indifference is a constant hunger. Man does not believe his own sophistication, and he finds it of very little comfort to him in times of emergency. He really wants to think, but he doesn't like to have other people find it out. He also would like to be an idealist, but he's afraid. He's afraid that his idealism will result in his being exploited. He's afraid that his honesty will mean that he will be an economic failure. This is a very bad state of affairs, and inexcusable in a world which calls itself civilized. Actually, we build monuments and memorials, delegate authority to. We create pylons, towers, bridges, name them after the honorable people in society, and then we carefully avoid their practices. We should and must sometime recognize that the entire progress of our community and of our world depends upon this increasing constructive thoughtfulness, the enriching of our lives and our capacities. It must then be reasonable, even on a scientific level, that each human being, moving from his own potentials and transforming these potentials into potencies, has a reasonable destiny suitable to himself. He has the right to release all that is available in his nature. And as a result of this release, to become a person, an individual, in whom all of these attributes and powers are manifested, are obvious, and are available when needed by himself or others. If then there is this problem of fulfillment, we should give a little thought to our instincts. Most normal, healthy persons have creative instincts. They carefully conceal them, or they turn from them with a sigh because it seems so impossible or unlikely that these instincts can ever be gratified. But we could gratify them if we would give in a little and not spend so much time gratifying lesser phases of our own psychic nature. I know persons who have always wanted music. I know one man who is now well past middle life, whose great desire from the beginning was to play the pipe organ. He talks about it periodically. He is a man who has sufficient means to buy a moderately priced electric pipe organ if he wants it. He is a man who has time enough to play it if he wants to. His family presents no problem. In fact, they probably would be delighted. One of the reasons being that he would no longer be wandering around like a ghost in his own home. He has a strangely abstract kind of nature. He works hard in his work, but by 5 o'clock he's home, and he does not work Saturdays or Sundays or in the evening. So he has the time. He's always wanted to, but he doesn't do a thing about it. He wanders around, he reads the paper, watches a couple of boxing matches over television, listens to the weather report, probably has a little more to drink than is good for him, finally toddles off to bed with a purposeless existence. Yet he wants to play the pipe organ. He just has never been able to get himself around to doing it. Now, it's true that a person starting a musical instrument as late in life as he is starting and with no previous training is not likely to attain extraordinary virtuosity. He probably will not be the greatest pipe organist in the world. In fact, he may be pretty well down the line. but he can enjoy it himself. And in a simple way, it will bring a measure of pleasure to those around him. Because you do not have to be great in order to have a pleasant relationship with an art. Nothing happens. Here is an ability gradually rotting out. And because of the frustration, and because of the general way of life, and because of the intemperance, he's very likely to develop arthritis one of these days, and then he can't. Nothing has been done to enrich that person's life. He doesn't enjoy a good book. He doesn't enjoy a thoughtful conversation with anyone. He's afraid. Perhaps one of the reasons he hasn't taken up the music is because he's afraid to play scales in front of his own children. He doesn't want to start in and be a child again with them in an art. He's trying to hang on to his maturity. He wants people to think that whatever he does well. And he knows that the moment he starts on the pipe organ, they will know that he doesn't do it well. So he's never going to start and expose himself. There are all kinds of peculiarities in human nature. But here is a very good example of a total waste of potential possibility. So this person is going to go out of this world with one large area of natural ability untouched. And because of this, he's going to be a lesser person than he would otherwise be. Actually, the total person that is possible to the individual is the best person. And to the degree that he falls short of it, he falls short of his own best. This means that whether we realize it or not, there is a kind of archetypal relationship. There is a peculiar over-pattern that moves with us. And we are created with the potential to transform this into living destiny. We are quite capable of a kind of destiny different from that of anyone else we know, a uniqueness, a unique contribution. For the end of high destiny is that we make that unique contribution. It may not be that it will be world-shattering. It may not be that this contribution will change the course of history, but who knows? When so few persons ever attain the perfection or completeness of their own archetype, how do we know what they would do if they could? Nearly everyone has a weak characteristic, like a weak leg, which prevents him from advancing. If we could think more of these essential patterns, we might be able to advance our civilization 10,000 years in 100 years, because all advance lies within man. And he's not getting out of himself the things that would bring about this larger advancement, this general good that we all recognize as so essential today. Now then, we can approach this on still another level. And that is the Oriental doctrine of karma. We are apparently here to do two things: increase our virtues and correct our faults. Therefore, to a large measure, the drag in us is due to our faults. And the law of karma tells us that these faults are the result of wrong action. Thus we have another purpose, and that is the correction of fault. If we could correct fault, incidentally, we would probably achieve most of the major goal already indicated, and that is total integration. It is our fault or our group of faults that forever frustrate the total expression of the good within us. But let us assume that as we come along archetypally in life, we are gradually presented by conditions of personality and temperament which we know to be undesirable. We know, for example, whether we procrastinate or not. We know our selfishness or our intolerance. We know the degree to which we will compromise integrity. We know the degree in which we are jealous. Or perhaps we know the negation in us, which gives us the weakness which prevents the courage of direct action in emergency. We know how short our tempers are. We know how despondent we can become, and how much we can be victimized by negative memory. These things we know. And they present another form of challenge, a challenge of destiny. For the Eastern philosophers say that the individual is bound to the cycle of necessity, bound to the mystery of birth and rebirth, as long as a fault remains in himself. Thus, if we wish to ascend to a more rarefied atmosphere, if we would like to graduate from the lower grades of this difficult school of hard knocks in which we are all enrolled, then the thing is to recognize the purpose of life as at least in part the correction of our own mistakes. Now, this is not exactly glamorous, but more glamorous than we think. I talked to a person about it not long ago, and he pointed out that perhaps the real reason why we're not more interested in correcting our own mistakes is that people don't applaud us so loudly for that. That they do not care much about the struggle we have inside, but if we go out and struggle on the tennis court or in a bowling alley, everybody sees how hard we're working. This isn't quite true, however, because while no one may applaud us for the correction of a fault, all the world rewards us for its correction. We are rewarded in a mysterious and wonderful way, because everything that was kept from us by that fault is now available to us. We will find that while our faults are not appreciated, our attainments become the basis of a new sense of values, not only on our own part, but on the part of others. So if we are here with one purpose, the purpose of correcting our own faults, this in itself can be a lordly career. Now, nature not only expects us to try, at least moderately, to accomplish this end, but penalizes us very heavily if we do not. Nature keeps from us most of the things we want because we are what we are and do not deserve these things. I like the Oriental philosophy of just deserts. I know it's a little difficult sometimes to appreciate, but there's a rugged honesty about it that we desperately need because of our natural over-inclination to escape personal responsibility whenever and wherever possible. So if we start out and we observe that down through the years we have certain patterns of trouble, largely because of certain attitudes we ourselves practice, then it is time to think about it and do something about it. Some time ago we had a very able man came in who had a problem. In the course of 10 or 15 years he had changed occupation about 10 or 15 times. He just could not stay with a job. He said he was bored by it. As soon as he could understand it and do it well, he didn't want to do it anymore. Actually, this man was in a predicament because he did have a family. But his own boredom was more important to him than the maintenance of his children. It was a serious situation arising simply from the fact that this person had never been able to integrate the sense of responsibility. He did not realize that it was good for an individual to do the things that may not give him the lesser pleasure, because they give him the sense of internal self-respect, which is important. He had not the ability to make this adjustment. So all the way down through the years, and probably into the future, he will lose self-respect in order to cultivate and maintain and protect his own personal love of change. These things have to be fought out. I know individuals who have lost every good thing in life, including 2 or 3 homes, because of jealousy. Yet they have never seriously attempted to correct it. They have never resolved to mend this weakness in themselves. And when you tell them that they must correct it, they look at you very helplessly. How? How are we going to get over these things? How are we going to feel different inside from the way we do feel inside? Is it conceivable that we could go against a feeling? To most people, it's just not conceivable. The development of self-control, therefore, is very seriously lacking. And our modern philosophy of life is a tendency to encourage this fault by causing us to become addicted to the belief that we should do exactly what we please. We find a cheerful evasion from personal growth. But the result of the philosophy is misery, and therefore it is not practical. If we could, for example, take some of our leisure time to strengthen something that is disappearing from our lives, and that is our social relationships pattern, we would gain a great deal. If we could actually come to see more directly and more continuously the result of action as it is revealed in the lives of those around us, if we could become a little more conscious of other persons' philosophies of life, watching the result of their actions, estimating, weighing the patterns and problems in which they are placed in terms of patterns of conduct, we would have a very valuable group of testimonies by which to judge our own actions. One of the reasons why we can continue to be thoughtless is because we are not brought into constant recognition of the penalties of thoughtlessness, as these penalties are played out in the lives of our own associates. We do not weigh other people's characters in terms of what is happening to those people. If we did this, we would have newer and stronger inducements to correct the same faults in ourselves. So we are here for another purpose, and that purpose is to bring life under the discipline of conscious reason. We are here to learn to do those things which are right and those things which are next. We are here to create a patterned existence with the assurance that to the degree that we create this pattern and live within it and allow it to unfold naturally and reasonably, we shall live with a minimum of stress and strain and a minimum of difficulty and disaster. Nature is constantly telling us that we are not using our resources correctly. people have succeeded in controlling themselves. And strange as it may seem, those who have succeeded are not the persons who made the greatest to-do about it. The individual under certain conditions will wake up and suddenly realize that if he does not run his life running itself will ruin him. When he makes this discovery, really, he starts doing something about it. He finds that he cannot survive by a philosophy of accidents, that he cannot drift from day to day hoping for the best, and that he is wasting more energy in hoping than he would need in order to make certain that the best occurs. If he finds himself in dismay about this and does not know which way to turn, then he is merely pointing out the deficiency in his own background, a deficiency which he should remedy as rapidly as humanly possible. Every effort should be made to bring the person to the degree in which he can handle his own life with a reasonable amount of dignity. Until he can do this, he is not going to be safe or secure. Now, it would accomplish a great deal in this destiny problem to think all these things through. But man, because his mind is not completely organized, and because he has not been given the proper conditioning, is not always able to make all of these adjustments. He is therefore presented with another attitude toward the whole subject of destiny, which is much ridiculed and laughed at today, but has a great deal of truth in it. Namely, what he cannot overcome by brute force and awkwardness, he can transmute by simple relaxation. Today, many people, I've been seeing some articles in popular journals bearing upon it, are howling against what they call the age of relaxation. Why they're howling against it, no one seems to know, because no one can find a relaxed person. But the danger in the public mind seems to be that if we let down a little and are not quite so hectic in our patterns, not so violent in everything that we do, that we shall gradually go into decline. We're in decline already, only we don't know it. And of course, the individual who cannot relax is a little envious of anyone who can. And there are some sour grapes in this concept somewhere. Actually, relaxation is our only hope in a great many instances. If you take a highly confused pattern, like the human personality, which is being torn constantly by impulses and instincts and attitudes and opinions, until it is being twisted into the most inconceivable snarls and tangles, every part of it becomes exceedingly tense, and the inner life of the person is fatiguing merely because of this motionless intensity of vibration. It isn't going anywhere, but it is all tied up in a nerve spasm. And because it is tied up, and because nerves in a mysterious way affect muscles, you have a psychological equivalent to a person in whose physical body there is muscle nerve stress, resulting in distortion of function. In this situation, to fight with each of these patterns, tear these muscle-bound elements apart, try to break through this nerve tension. Such procedure is fighting a situation that is already in a highly complex and painful state. It is like fighting with a sore muscle or an aching nerve. It just hurts worse. So we have an entirely different possibility in this. If we can relax these pressures, relax these tensions, the chances are that all the parts of the psychic nature will fall into place. When we are not forcing them to be what they are not, they will gradually reveal what they are. When we do not interpret the truth out of them, we will find the truth that is in them. And when we are able to let down this false forcing of things inside of ourselves, our own psychic life will drop into place. It will suddenly reveal itself to be the victim of our pressure. Man is not the victim of his psychic life. His psychic life is the victim of his external existence, bound and twisted and distorted by his own pressures and his own intemperances. Thus, by a kind of relaxation, man can come to the reorganizing of his internal. This relaxation will take pressureful points out of activity. He will no longer be forcing this, decreeing that, demanding something else. And as he does this, he learns this sense of relaxation. He gets a wonderful psychological therapy, and at the same time, perhaps gets the first look at what he really is. And before he can know what he can do, he must know what he is, what he has to work with. Here is where your mystical and your religious factor become so important. Because faith, in a certain sense, is man's trusting to the universe for value. Man's gradually increasing belief that he is in a lawful world, and that in a truly lawful universe, that which is not lawful can never win or ultimately dominate his affairs. Faith takes the fear out of relationships and incidents and circumstances. And where fear goes, pressure lets down. And as pressure lets down, solutional value begins to emerge. The fearful person is preventing himself from solving his own fear. He is making it impossible to use the faculties by which he could overcome fear naturally. Man is not primarily intended to be fearful, but he becomes fearful through pressure and through the failure to develop resources of consciousness. Thus it would be that faith, causing the letting down of these pressures, can be a simple and direct approach to integration, to organization. The individual simply develops a sense of the strength of truth, the strength of reality itself, and begins to feel that if he can form a partnership with reality, all else will work well. He also learns from faith an emotional experience that is positive and aesthetically sound. Faith carries with it, if it is natural and true, a certain serenity, a certain veneration, an admiration for good, a respect for value, a sense of honesty, and a degree of humility. These together exercise emotions that we do not use to any great degree in our objective living. Here we live by suspicion. Yet by faith we learn to rise above suspicion as an internal experience. From all these values, the growth of faith, the growth of the realization of the fact of good, throws the entire pattern of man's subconscious into the positive. He begins to energize archetypal ideas that are constructive. And as these are energized, he has less energy for those ideas which are not constructive. He develops a habit of constructive internal visualization. This will be a long way toward solution. It also causes the person to take a receptive attitude toward intangibles. Instead of immediately tearing everything to pieces with his own doubts, he begins to assume the possibility of there being values which should not be and cannot be assailed because they are true. And these values, coming through himself as greater comfort, greater relaxation, greater integration, usually are not questioned. The person finds in these values the fulfillment or justification of his faith pattern. So with all these problems of purposed existence, a man struggling with good and bad and indifferent, he needs this core of faith. Faith in good, faith in truth, faith in beauty, and faith in the ultimate victory of principle over compromise. This faith will gradually affect his distribution of resources. Faith, making the internal strength available, releases potential for its own fulfillment. Fear locks the inner resources of man. Hate locks them. Suspicion locks them. Doubt locks them. But faith, hope, and charity unlock them. The individual becoming receptive to what he considers to be a spiritual force from within his own nature also becomes receptive to his total internal. He becomes a servant of the archetypal need of his total being. Whereas prior to that, he was trying to tell his total being what it could do and what it could not do, although he had no idea what was needed in either case. Thus, faith makes the person settle back into the archetypal design. The little parts form again the magnificent geometric snowflake that is the true picture or symbol of the thing that we are and the thing that we can be. From this archetype we can move with a greater hope, a greater personal dedication. We find, therefore, all the way along that constructive thinking and constructive emotions are the unlockers. They are the powers that help us to estimate the purpose for our own existence. If we can develop them, we will find also that they carry with them dedication. The person moved by a strong inward faith begins to organize his outward life. If he believes in good, he will not only visualize it, but he will attempt to bring it forth out of himself into manifestation. Faith, therefore, provides the individual with new work to do. Work that supports and unfolds and sustains the growth of faith within himself. Many persons who have had the experience of faith have found total careers in it. They have realized that for the first time they can accept a duty for others, that they can find their happiness in service rather than in selfishness. these people begin to find new interests. Their lives are fuller. They are not leaning upon others for amusement, entertainment, and security. They do not have to compromise because their principles satisfy them. And while there is a conflict between principle and conduct, it simply means that our concept of principle is not clear enough to dominate the compromises of our thinking. All of this then adds together into a sort of broad pattern, namely that there are purposes in every level which we must contribute to, and we have the power to do it. We have the power to be conscious servants of the pattern or plan which underlies our way of existence. We were born to serve, and we are never happy until we do. And one of the simplest ways of serving is through the permitting of faith, a warm, idealistic, emotional creativity to lead us on this way of service, a way that brings us greater satisfaction than we can perhaps attain in any other way. Each person has the duty, therefore, for the responsibilities around him, which he has voluntarily assumed. We are here each day for the purposes which we have accepted. And if we fail these accepted purposes, we are in a measure humiliated internally. And in spite of our bluffing, we do not feel as well as we would had we done better. We are here also because of a common need. We live in a highly interdependent world. No individual can simply have his own career without affecting others. Consequently, we are here to advance those phases of our lives which are most benevolent in their effects upon both ourselves and others. We are here not only to grow, but to keep faith and to keep patterns and to keep rules. And our happiness, our real happiness, comes from these realizations well applied. Today the world is not happy. Perhaps it is less happy than ever before. We have more and we are more dissatisfied. We live in a perpetual insecurity and in a psychological chaos. We know this, but we have not recognized the importance of meeting this challenge. Man who is here today, the human family of today, has the tremendous and radiant opportunity to correct the fault of the ages. Sometime there must arise the practical solution to world problems. And that practical solution must come from man releasing his total resources and not merely those phases of his energy which are economically profitable. We are destitute for great idealists in America today. We have no great poets. We have no truly great playwrights. We have no truly great novelists. Very few great artists. Very few outstanding examples of creativity, except in the field of science. Thus we are unbalanced. And as long as we remain unbalanced, we are in danger of extermination. Because as surely as our physical success depends upon science, so the moral will to exist and survive depends upon the enlightenment of our inner lives. Without this inner motion, we become weary, disillusioned, disappointed. And these emotions lead inevitably to racial suicide. They lead also individually to the loss of opportunity. I would say then that in answer to this simple problem, are we here with a purpose? We are. We are here definitely with a purpose. The purpose of truly being ourselves. And the failure to attain this purpose is the principal source of unhappiness in this world. The individual who falls short of himself is unhappy. The individual who fails to make use of his available resources is frustrated. Frustration is not the fact that the individual is prevented from expressing. The greatest frustration of all is the lack of desire to express, the lack of that resourcefulness. For if the determination to express is great enough, man will express. Nothing can stop him. Nothing can stop him but the weakness of his own impulse. The individual, in order to attain health, adjustment, security, and peace, must fulfill his own purpose. He must release, strengthen, dedicate until his character is sufficient to his need on every level of action. In this also he fulfills another large and important equation, because it is his responsibility collectively to leave this world a little better than he finds it. And to leave it merely with atomic jitters is not the answer. To leave this world on the brink of catastrophe is an indictment of all of us. It means that we have never gathered ourselves into a determined pattern of anything. We have never supported those leaders who did try. We have always fought desperately for any small issue that looked as though it would add something to our comfort or put an extra dollar in our pockets. For these considerations, we have sacrificed the fate of empire and the destiny of the world. Unless we get over this, we will be in trouble. We cannot get over it unless our own internal sense of values becomes bigger. And the only way that can become bigger is for man to release some of the real greatness that is locked within him. It's there, but he is desperately afraid that it will come out. And it had better come out, or Hiroshima will be nothing to the future. These things are reminders again of law, that we do live in a lawful world, that we must work out our salvation with diligence. And one of the purposes of our existence is to work out this salvation. And the salvation of the individual means that he must stand firmly with truth, that he must place principle above everything else, and that by so doing he will not run into bankruptcy. He is headed there now by failure of principle. But by putting principle first and building his entire economic system upon fact, instead of upon the shifting sand of inflated profit, he would have today, if he had so built, an economic system just as great, just as sufficient, but absolutely infallible, because it would be founded in law. But he has omitted the law. He has gone against it. And therefore he is destined to prop up this strange mass of circumstances, which he now calls a system. If he becomes capable of integrating his own life The moment he envisions his own purpose, he will be aware of world purpose. He will not live in a nation or in a world that lives only for today because it does not know where it is going tomorrow and is not sure that it cares. Today we have no dream, no purpose, no hope as far as a national or international perspective may be concerned. Our only thought is that we must outlaw certain evils. We must find an answer to war. How, we do not know. We hope the United Nations will tell us. But it will not, as long as our personal internal psychology is falling to pieces all the time. But we have no dream, no conception, nothing to dedicate our youth to, nothing that we're all going to get up together, forget the extra dollar profit, roll up our sleeves and go to work for something. We do not have it. And because we do not have it collectively, we have no real way of commanding the essential principle of loyalty in the American people. And we have no way of commanding this essential principle of loyalty in the home, in the business, or in our own personal lives. We do not sense loyalty to ourselves. And until we do sense these things, we cannot fulfill our destiny. Therefore, destiny is discovery. We must discover these values, and we must learn to live them. We must make them important, for it is our job, our destiny, to preserve the work of the ages, to advance it, to make it grow, to preserve the heritage we have and pass it on better as a heritage to others. These are our jobs. We have lots of work to do. So the problem is to stop fussing, stop worrying, stop being self-pitying. Roll up the sleeves and go to work. And begin with the one unit in which you know you can succeed if you want to, yourself. And moving out from that, from accomplishment, you will find that by degrees you can watch the world grow better as the result of the conscientious effort of even a small minority of enlightened persons who have accepted their job and who realize what their true destiny actually is. Well, time's up.